The first thing my father heard that morning was the sound of a deadbolt clicking. The second thing he heard was HOA President Marla Voss laughing. And the third thing he heard was his own daughter screaming from the other side of the front door. "Open this door right now." But the door didn't open, because Marla had changed the locks. My father, Raymond Ray Mercer, was 72 years old. He had served 26 years in the United States Army and had come home from his final deployment with a permanent leg injury that made walking difficult. He used a motorized wheelchair. He had a ramp leading to his front door. And for nearly 18 years, he had lived quietly in the same suburban neighborhood in Cedar Ridge, Ohio. He had never missed a mortgage payment, never skipped an HOA fee, never received a serious violation, until Marla Voss became president of the Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association. Marla was the kind of woman who treated the neighborhood like her private kingdom. She wore perfectly pressed suits, carried a leather folder everywhere she went, and seemed to believe that every driveway, mailbox, flower bed, and front door existed solely for her approval. But my father had never been afraid of her. That was probably why she hated him. The trouble began with his wheelchair ramp. One Monday morning, Marla sent him a violation notice. "Your ramp is visually inconsistent with the neighborhood aesthetic." My father stared at the letter for nearly a minute. Then he laughed. Not because it was funny, because he couldn't believe someone had actually written it. The ramp was painted the same neutral color as his house. It was professionally installed. And more importantly, it was the only reason my father could safely get in and out of his own home. He ignored the demand. 2 weeks later, another letter arrived. Then another. Then Marla started appearing outside his house. "You have 30 days to remove that ramp," she said one afternoon. My father looked at her from his wheelchair. "Marla, I need that ramp to enter my home." "That is not my problem, Raymond. My disability is not a neighborhood violation." Her expression hardened. "Watch your tone." My father had faced combat zones. He had been injured serving his country. He had spent months learning how to walk again. But Marla Voss somehow believed she could intimidate him over a ramp. She was wrong. The real attack began 3 weeks later. I was at work when my phone rang. It was my father. His voice sounded different. Not frightened. Angry. "Cassidy," he said, "there are men outside my house." I immediately stood up. "What men?" "They say they're here to change the locks." My stomach dropped. "What?" Before he could answer, I heard a loud banging through the phone. Then a man's voice shouted from outside. "Mr. Mercer, you need to vacate the property." My father yelled back. "This is my home." I grabbed my keys and ran to my car. I was 20 minutes away. Those 20 minutes felt like an hour. I kept calling my father. No answer. Then I called again. Still nothing. When I finally reached the neighborhood, I saw 2 men standing near my father's front porch. A locksmith was kneeling beside the door, and Marla Voss was standing behind him with a folder in her hand. My father was trapped inside. His wheelchair was positioned near the front window. I could see him clearly. He looked furious and helpless. I jumped out of my car. "What are you doing?" Marla turned slowly. "Cassidy Mercer, you are trespassing on HOA-controlled property." I stared at her. "This is my father's house. Not according to the foreclosure documents." My heart stopped. "What foreclosure documents?" Marla opened her folder. "Your father has violated multiple community regulations. The HOA placed a lien on the property. Since he failed to resolve the matter, the property was legally seized." I looked at my father. He shook his head. "That is a lie." Marla smiled. "Your father was given multiple notices." "Notices about a wheelchair ramp?" "Among other things." I stepped toward her. "You changed the locks while he was still inside. He has been instructed to leave. He is disabled." Marla shrugged. "Then perhaps he should have followed the rules." That was the moment I realized this had never been about a ramp. Marla wanted my father gone. And she believed the HOA gave her the power to make that happen. The locksmith stood up. "Ma'am, I was told the property was legally transferred." I pointed at the door. "My father is still inside." The locksmith hesitated. Marla immediately snapped. "Continue your work." He reached for the lock. My father rolled toward the window. Then he shouted something that made Marla freeze. Cassidy, check the blue folder. I looked at him. What blue folder? The one from the county. Marla's face changed. For the first time that day, she looked nervous. I ran back to my car and searched through the papers my father had given me months earlier. There it was. A blue county folder. Inside was a document I had never seen before. And at the top of the page were 6 words that made my blood run cold. Notice of invalid HOA foreclosure action. I looked up at Marla. She was no longer smiling. I held up the document. Marla. Her face went pale. What is that? I took one step toward her. It's a document from the county recorder. The locksmith slowly lowered his tools. My father watched through the window. And then I read the next line aloud. This property is not legally subject to the foreclosure action filed by Cedar Ridge HOA. Marla stared at me. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then she reached into her folder and pulled out another document. This is a legal order. I looked at it. Something immediately felt wrong. The signature was blurry. The seal looked copied. And the date was from a day when the county courthouse had been closed. I looked at Marla. Where did you get this? She didn't answer. I pulled out my phone and called the sheriff. Marla laughed. You think the sheriff is going to help you? I looked straight at her. No. I glanced toward my father's window. I think he's going to help my father. And less than 10 minutes later, a sheriff's cruiser turned into the neighborhood. But the deputy who stepped out wasn't alone, because behind him was the county investigator. And the moment they saw the documents Marla had used to lock a disabled veteran out of his own home, everything changed. The sheriff's cruiser stopped directly in front of my father's house. Marla Voss immediately straightened her jacket. For the first time since I had arrived, she looked uncertain. A deputy stepped out of the vehicle. Behind him was County Investigator Nolan Pierce. Nolan looked at Marla. Who is in charge here? Marla raised her hand. I am the president of the Homeowners Association. Nolan looked past her. Is that the homeowner inside the property? My father rolled toward the window. Yes, he shouted. Nolan walked closer. Mr. Mercer, are you locked inside your home? My father answered immediately. Yes. The deputy looked at Marla. Why is a disabled homeowner locked inside his residence? Marla lifted her folder. This is a legal HOA enforcement action. Nolan held out his hand. Let me see the documents. Marla hesitated. That hesitation said everything. Finally, she handed him the paper. Nolan studied it. Then he looked at the deputy. Call the county recorder's office. Marla's face tightened. You don't need to do that. Nolan looked back at her. Yes, we do. The call lasted less than 2 minutes. When Nolan hung up, the entire atmosphere changed. He turned toward Marla. This document is not a valid foreclosure order. Marla shook her head. That is impossible. It is not signed by a judge. It has a seal. It has a copied seal. Marla went silent. The locksmith slowly stepped away from the house. I looked at Marla. You told him he had been legally evicted. She said nothing. Nolan continued. The property was never legally transferred to the HOA. My father stared through the window. Then he whispered. I knew it. But Nolan wasn't finished. He opened another document. This lien was filed against the property 3 months ago. Marla folded her arms. Exactly. Nolan looked at her. But the lien amount was only $1,840. Marla's face changed. What does that have to do with anything? Nolan looked at the papers. The foreclosure document claims the HOA took possession of a property valued at nearly $400,000. I felt my stomach turn. You tried to take his entire house over an $1,840 dispute? Marla snapped. He violated the rules. Nolan's voice became colder. That still does not give you the authority to lock the homeowner inside his residence. The deputy turned to the locksmith. Sir, did you know the homeowner was inside? The locksmith looked terrified. I was told the house had been legally seized. By whom? The locksmith slowly pointed at Marla. Marla immediately shouted. That is not true. The deputy asked him again. The locksmith swallowed. She gave me the documents. Nolan turned back to Marla. Where did you get the foreclosure order? Marla stared at him. I don't have to answer that. Nolan's expression hardened. If you knowingly presented a fraudulent document to force someone from his home, you may have to. The neighborhood had gone silent. Several residents had come outside. For months, Marla had acted like she was untouchable. She had sent violation letters, threatened fines, placed liens, and frightened elderly homeowners into obedience. But now everyone was watching her, and she was finally the one being questioned. Then my father said something from inside the house. Cassidy. I turned. Look at the bottom of the document. I took the paper from Nolan and examined it. There was a small reference number at the bottom. I searched it online. The number belonged to a completely different property, a vacant lot 3 miles away. I looked at Marla. You didn't even use the right property number. Her face went completely white. Nolan took the document back. That explains why the county couldn't verify it. The deputy walked toward the front door. Open the door. The locksmith immediately moved. Within seconds, the new lock was removed. The door swung open. I rushed inside. My father was still sitting in his wheelchair. His hands were shaking. I knelt beside him. Dad, are you okay? He nodded. Then he looked toward the front door. I wasn't afraid of her. I knew he was lying. Because my father had spent nearly 2 hours trapped inside his own home. His phone had almost died. His medication was on the kitchen counter. And his emergency wheelchair battery was running low. If the locksmith had disconnected the power, or if my father had needed immediate medical assistance, things could have become dangerous very quickly. Nolan entered the house. Mr. Mercer, I need to ask you some questions. My father nodded. But before he could speak, I remembered something. Wait. I pulled out my phone. I have a recording. Marla suddenly stepped forward. What recording? I pressed play. It was from the morning Marla had first threatened my father. Her voice came clearly through the speaker. Remove the ramp, or I will make sure you lose this house. The neighborhood became completely silent. My father's voice followed. You cannot take my home because I need a wheelchair ramp. Marla's recorded voice answered. Watch me. Marla stared at the phone. That recording is illegal. Nolan looked at her. You made the statement? Marla said nothing. Then another recording played. This one was from a private HOA meeting. Marla was speaking to several board members. Raymond Mercer is the problem. If we force him out, we can buy the property through the HOA's investment group. My father looked at me. What? I felt sick. Nolan's expression changed. Investment group? One of the board members standing outside suddenly stepped forward. I can explain. Nolan turned. Then you should. The truth came out quickly. Marla had been working with a private development company. The company wanted several properties in the neighborhood. My father's home was one of the largest lots. The HOA had placed questionable violations against him. Then they had created an inflated lien. Then they attempted to use fraudulent paperwork to seize the property. And the wheelchair ramp had simply been the excuse. Marla had believed my father was an easy target. An elderly disabled veteran. Living alone. Someone she assumed would be too tired or too afraid to fight back. But she had made one mistake. She had forgotten that my father had a daughter. And she had underestimated a man who had spent his entire life standing up when everyone else expected him to stay down. The sheriff's deputy placed his hand on Marla's arm. Ma'am, you are being detained pending investigation into fraudulent documents, unlawful entry, and possible financial fraud. Marla stared at my father. You can't do this to me. My father looked at her calmly. No, Marla. He glanced toward the sheriff. You did this to yourself. As Marla was escorted away, the neighborhood watched in silence. The next morning, the county officially removed the invalid lien from my father's property. The HOA board was investigated. Several members resigned. And the development deal collapsed. But my father did something nobody expected. He didn't just repair the ramp. He expanded it. He added better lighting, stronger railings, and a small sign near the entrance. It read, "Every person deserves to feel safe coming home." A month later, the neighborhood voted to replace the entire HOA board. And my father? He was asked to serve on the Community Accessibility Committee. He declined the position. Instead, he said, "I've spent enough years being told where I can and cannot stand." Then he smiled. "Now I think I'll just sit on my porch." And that's exactly what he did. Every afternoon. In the same wheelchair. In front of the same house Marla Voss had tried to steal. Because she had locked a disabled veteran out of his own home. But the sheriff's arrival didn't just open the door. It opened the truth. And once the truth came out, Marla's entire little kingdom came crashing down.